I mean, you were quoted as saying in the Sioux College President David Orazietti some pretty wild things. You called him a whore. Yet I note that your salary is it's over $600,000. You are now the highest paid college university president in the province. We've heard some pretty bad things about foreign students at your college. How do you reconcile those comments you made about another university president with your present salary and the mess that the region now finds itself in due to your decisions to juice foreign student permits to that level?
You said all of our students found housing. So you're telling me that in those years, 2022, 23, 24,
yes.
there were no students that had to live 14 in a room. There were no students living under bridges.
Well, I don't think anyone was living under a bridge. I know there was a picture.
Your bank account has massively increased, in large part because of this increase you've had from international students, no doubt. The government often speaks of bad actors. The media talks about it, and Conestoga, sadly, is one of the names that always comes up. What do you have to say about that?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Welcome to meeting number 7 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, colleagues. Conestoga College took in 84,000 international students in 4 years. In 2023, they took in more than the U of T, UBC, and Calgary combined. And this had an incredibly negative impact on the cost of housing, availability of healthcare services, and created a youth jobs crisis in the region. But yet, Conestoga College's operating surplus went from $3 million in 2015 to $252 million in 2024. Dr. Tibbits, in 2024, in an article in Guelph Today, you were quoted as saying some of them, international students, live like that, 14 to a house in slumlord housing, because they don't want to pay more than $400. You are still requesting record number of foreign students permits. Is that correct? You are on mute.
Monsieur Tibbits, vous êtes sur
Mr. Tibbits, you are on mute.
No, we've always worked with both the federal government, provincial government, and the local communities. That's why we took in that many students. I mean, we could find places for all those students. This is a massive area. We're not just in Kitchener, Waterloo, and Guelph. We're across
but
Brantford, Milton.
Madame Roopa.
But the cost of a one-bedroom rent in your region went up by 35%, over $500 in a very short period of time. Did the federal government ever ask you to tie your requests for foreign student permits to housing costs and availability in your broader region?
No.
No. Do you think you'd be able to have juiced foreign student permits to the levels that you did if the federal government had tied the number of foreign student permits they issued to your institution to housing availability and cost?
Well, it's more than the federal government. We were encouraged to grow in downtown Kitchener. We added 3,500 students there because we helped the city revitalize downtown, the same in Guelph and the same in Brantford and Milton. I mean, there was a huge demand. There was huge, I think in the fall of 22 in Ontario, there were 323,000 job vacancies, and we were asked to try to help solve that problem.
Thank you. So we just heard testimony that we should be decoupling foreign student permits from jobs. And now there is a substantive youth jobs crisis both in Canada but also in your broader region. Do you think, did the federal government ever ask you to link permit availability to job availability in the region?
Well, that's what we did. We did link the two. In fact, if you look at...
But recently?
I'm not aware that they did that, no, but we did it. That's what we did. In fact, our job placement rate for international students was 86% after 6 months after graduation.
Did the federal government ever ask you to take any responsibility for asylum claims, fraudulent asylum claims being made by foreign students who were issued permits to your institution?
Well, there was one statement made by Minister Miller, but as far as I'm concerned, that's Canadian Border Services. We are not. The first time we've ever heard anything about asylum seekers when Mr. Miller spoke to that.
Would you have not been able to juice foreign student permit numbers to the levels that you did if your institution had a financial liability tied to asylum claims or visa overstays made by foreign students at your institution?
Well, we were never involved in this from day one. We got involved in international enrollment back in the 90s. There was no money to be made. We didn't try to make money. We were just trying to meet skill shortage needs. That's
I'm just making a note for the analysts because I think that's a recommendation that probably needs to be made after what happened at your institution. It was pretty bad. I noted that the Waterloo Regional Health Authority, they're now charging for non-residents to have births at their hospitals. If the number of foreign student permits issued to your university or your institution had been tied to healthcare levels or healthcare support, would you have been able to access or juice student permits to the levels that you did?
We had our own healthcare center at the college. We invested in healthcare for the students. They could come, but we don't handle pregnancies at the college. But we had a full health center at the college, including mental health services.
I mean, I got to say, it's kind of a mess, hey? I mean, you were quoted as saying in the Sioux College President David Orazietti, some pretty wild things. You called him a whore. Yet I note that your salary is it's over $600,000. You are now the highest paid college university president in the province. We've heard some pretty bad things about foreign students at your college. How do you reconcile those comments you made about another university president with your present salary and the mess that the region now finds itself in due to your decisions to juice foreign student permits to that level?
Well, first of all, the region is not in a mess. And secondly, I did apologize about that matter. That was a mistake.
Okay. There's been a lot of polling that has said that Canada's immigration consensus is broken. Do you take any responsibility for that, given that you juiced foreign student permits to a level where healthcare, housing, and jobs clearly didn't have the capacity in your region?
Une courte réponse, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur Tibbits. Vous avez 10 secondes.
A short answer, Mr. Tibbits. You have 10 seconds.
Well, first of all our students found housing, and they weren't all living in. No, they did. They found.
Okay,
housing.
merci pour ça.
Thank
You had said that bad actors were generally those outside of the university sector. I'm assuming outside of also in Quebec, the CIGIP sector, which is post-secondary. And you said that the bad actors tend to be driven by recruiters who are profit-driven. Now, we've talked about housing and availability of housing for students. Has most of the challenges around housing for students been within the sector of these bad actors?
I don't know if I can fully answer that question. We certainly have had bad actors. They're largely outside the university system. We have had some concern with Algoma University's operations in Brampton, which exploded by something like 1,000% in enrollments over the course of the pandemic, and have recently been seriously cut back, throwing that institution into some economic crisis. But beyond that, I can't comment on the actual housing impacts.
Would you say that universities do extra effort as compared to these bad actors when it comes to supporting students about the cost of living, the expenses related to projecting the expenses that they will need to live on their own? Do universities do a better job than these bad actors, these quote-unquote bad actors, in terms of helping students understand the costs to study here away from home?
I think it's likely certain that that's the case. But I think the larger picture is that universities are institutions with long-term time horizons. They operate on 5-year plans, but they hire their instructors on much longer durations, and we need to sync up policies at the federal, provincial, and with universities in a way that actually works on those time horizons instead of...
So you said it likely is the case. Would you be able to, if you're able to, get back to the committee with just a bit of research on whether or not it actually is the case for so that we can include that in our study? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
We are over to Mr. Redicott for our 5-minute round.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Tibbits, in 2024, Conestoga had over 30,000 international students. Is that correct? Okay, and you're muted again, by the way. So that's about 75% of your student population. It's safe to say that you had one of the largest, if not the largest, enrollments of international students among colleges in Canada. Is that correct?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. It's also then safe, I think, to assume that the federal government was aware of Conestoga and its impact. Did the federal government come to you in 2023 or 24 with concerns about the massive growth in international students?
No.
Okay. So then it came as a surprise when they announced the cap on study permits in 2024?
That's difficult to answer. I think what was starting to happen here, there was... there was a sudden change.
Sorry, I don't need to interrupt you, but I think we understand there was a lot of things that happened. So I think there must have been some element of surprise. I guess, so Minister Sean Fraser allowed unlimited study permits, a system that Conestoga adapted to, and then Minister Miller pulled the rug out from that system with surprise hard caps. Is the Liberal government to blame for creating this mess?
Well, I think that that what we have done all along is work with the feds, work with the province, work with municipalities and industry, and they certainly wanted us to grow dramatically because they couldn't fill positions across a wide range of industries, healthcare, skilled trades. It's a huge issue in our community. So there's no question that we needed to grow dramatically.
You're saying the federal government was encouraging you to grow those student populations as much as you could?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Prior to these surprise caps, did any Immigration Canada officials contact you with concerns about the availability of student housing?
No.
So the government was oblivious to this or didn't care about housing, I guess.
But also we added, just so you know, we spent about $300 million on additional housing, leases, purchasing. We set up a housing office.
When this happened
to help students.
When this great growth in your student population happened between 22 and 23, 24, your population increased by 16,000 students. And with the housing shortage that was in the area, students had to live in sometimes dozens or more of people in one house. So is it safe to assume that you were more concerned with the potential revenue from these students than with the living conditions of the students?
It was never our intention. It was not the money. I know that one gentleman was talking about the funding. That's not what why we grew the international. We grew the international because we don't have enough domestic students to fill the jobs in our region. That's the reason we did it.
You said we
invested everything in that. We invested every bit of that back into the community.
You said all of our students found housing. So you're telling me that in those years, 2022, 23, 24, there were no students that had to live 14 in a room. There were no students living under bridges.
I don't think anyone was living under a bridge. I know there was a picture, but I don't think anyone was. In our area, students, don't forget, we were across 6 cities. And so students were able to find places with our help. We know that because we work with the students. Now, some students may have lived in there may have been a few people, but 3 or 4 people in a house.
Let's switch gears and talk about living expenses. The Liberals required students to have $10,000 a year, which you must have known was not enough to live in the region. But you didn't do anything about this. And that caused students to go to food banks to survive. Doesn't this prove you were more interested in tuition dollars than your students' living conditions?
No. First of all, we inform students in this part of the recruitment process what the real costs were of coming to Canada. But you got to remember, a lot of students really wanted to come to Canada, but we informed them of that. And the food banks, we had food security programs on every campus, and we reimbursed the food banks at least 30 or 40,000. We work with them. So there was food security programs on each campus across the 6 cities.
Dr. Tibbits, you had $550 million in your bank account on March 31st of this year. Do you deserve your $600,000 salary?
That's the salary I'm being paid by, and I take the job very seriously. And we have poured at least $500 million back into the community. This year alone, we're spending about $140 million on investing.
I've one last question.
We're spending $80 million a year.
When you spoke about your colleague and called him a whore, he was speaking about the bad actors. Conestoga's name always comes up in that list. Is Conestoga a bad actor?
We have always worked with the 3 levels of government to provide services and really to meet our objectives, and that is to stimulate the economy.
Thank you. Over to Ms. Sodhi.
Universities themselves initiated the recruitment of international students in Canada. Are you able to just tell us how this process began, what motivated it, and what strategies universities use to attract students from abroad?
So Canada is an anomaly in that sense because unlike other countries, we've never had the federal government or any of the governments have not really invested in what you see in Britain, which is the British Council, or the US used to have the US educational foundations all over the world. We've never really invested in marketing our educational services many years ago abroad. So the institutions themselves, the universities, saw the value in hosting international students for research, for exchanges, for building, that's the role of higher education, is to build academic scholarship. So it is the universities that initiated this process as part of what is called internationalization of higher education, to expand their outreach, to expand their affiliations. So I would say Canada has been an anomaly because before the federal government stepped in and had formal policies, it was universities, institutions themselves that began developing initiatives with other countries with hosting international students. And so universities used to have even till today, their own offices that recruit students and recruit scholars all over the world. At one time, they invested more than the federal government or provincial governments ever invested in recruiting students from abroad. So institutions have been on the front line, but things started changing over time, and the federal government and provincial government started taking interest and started investing monies in recruitment. But in that sense, Canada is an anomaly. We never see this. We've never really seen this in any other parts of the world where the institutions took the lead, but we did. I don't know if that answers. Again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them further.
Thank you so much. I know we're a little bit short on time now, so just very quickly, you've also written about the problems that arise when international education is treated as an industry. From your perspective, what would it take to rebalance the system so that international students are treated fairly, receive meaningful academic and employment opportunities, and are able to fully contribute to Canada's economy and society?
So I would say, going back to one of the points I made about how we can learn from other systems and other jurisdictions, one of the very interesting countries to look at is Germany, because just like Canada, Germany is a highly decentralized federation, but it doesn't have the same financial impetus to host international students. International students can still study without differential tuition in Germany. And one of the things you'll notice is that the international student population is very diverse, and it is more focused on...
I'll just get you to wrap up quickly.
Very specific specializations. So one can look at other jurisdictions, but I would again go back to my first point.
Thank you. We are out of time, but maybe we'll come back to you. I gave you an extra 30 seconds because I'm feeling so generous.
No worries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Tibbits. Mr. Tibbits, I was surprised when you made the comment that you don't have problems in the region. Are you aware that what the youth unemployment rate is in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge area alone, which is the area that you primarily service?
No, I didn't say we didn't have problems. I think I did say that there are challenges when you bring that many. But to me, we look at the greater good. The contribution that was made as far as job placement was enormous. The investment.
Mr. Tibbits, I believe your response to my colleague when she mentioned that the region is a mess, you said, first of all, we don't have those problems. We don't have. It's not a mess. And I would argue with you, sir, that 16.7% unemployment rate amongst the youth is not something to brag about in the region, especially when you're bringing in international students at astronomical numbers, which obviously pads the bottom line, and I'm sure tied into your salary and your bonus structure. Do you not think that housing students? You also said that we found housing for everybody. Well, one of your own counselors in the region spoke to a student who couldn't take it anymore after living in a house with 14 other students, or 13 other students. He was number 14. He saw him walking down the street with the only possession he had in the house because he couldn't live in a house with 13 other people. And the only possession he had was a chair. Do you think that's falls under housing?
No, if that's a reality, that's not good. We want our students to be housed properly. Obviously.
Well, it is a reality. It was public, sir. It was published in a newspaper. It was one of the counselors that said it. I believe his name was Michael Harris.
Yes.
He went public about it, and I think it's something that you would have known or ought to have known as a person of some repute in the area. Mm-hmm. Now, my next question to you is simply this. Conestoga, by your admission and your financial statements, raked in millions from international students, knowing there wasn't enough housing, knowing there wasn't enough, that some of those students will be visiting food banks, also knowing that there's an unemployment crisis in the area. $500 million, more than $500 million in your bank account. It was over 700 million last year. You said you've invested about 150. That leaves you with about 550 left. Your bank account has massively increased, in large part because of this increase you've had from international students, no doubt. The government often speaks of bad actors. The media talks about it, and Conestoga, sadly, is one of the names that always comes up. What do you have to say about that?
Well, what I have to say is that we've invested all that money. We've put at least $500 million into infrastructure, new programs. We hired hundreds of people. We expanded our housing base. We worked with each community. Look, we were encouraged. We helped to revitalize downtown. Obviously, there were some difficulties.
With all due respect,
no question about it.
With all due respect, don't you feel you should have some social responsibility to the community that you serve? This year alone, you're laying off people. Why are you laying off people? You have $550 million in the bank by public records. You make an astronomical salary. Why are you laying people off?
Well, we don't have $500 million in the bank. That's not the case. We do not have $5 million, and the numbers, as you know, have been cut dramatically.
Thank you.
Numbers have been cut dramatically.
Thank you.
You were speaking about what other countries are doing, the good examples from other countries. And you did touch briefly upon Germany, and maybe you can weave that in a bit as you answer. But I'd like to know, what lessons do you think that we can learn, Canada can learn from other countries in terms of how they aren't overly reliant on international student tuition?
Thank you. Yes, I think there's lots we can learn from other countries. As I said, Germany is an excellent example because it shows us how a system that's not reliant on tuition from international students can support international students and support local institutions of the benefits of hosting international students. Mind you, Germany also has an interest in transferring international students to future immigrants in their country as well. But as I mentioned, they have a wide diversity of students. It's a far more balanced approach. They look at international students as high-skilled labor, not just folks who would fill in any labor situations in their country. They have far more local level initiatives that are worth looking at. They have many protective mechanisms so that international students do not face the exploitation our students have faced in the labor market when they do seek jobs. In New Zealand, for example, they have what is a new code of practice, which is looking at learner safety and well-being. So there are many models that we can look at and look to see how they've consulted to develop these processes processes, what kind of partnerships they've built. As I said before, I think in Canada, our major challenge is the kind of decentralization we have and the system we have, where I don't mean to suggest that we should have a federal Ministry of Education, but the fact is we don't have one, and that changes a lot of situations for us. But there's lots we can learn about mechanisms for protection, for systems of practice, for looking at care and well-being, and to create regulating, monitoring, and legislative acts that other countries have done. So yes, there's lots we can learn and really reinforce this idea that we need to fund our system.
Thank you. And I invite you to put anything in addition in writing to us so we could consider it for the report. You spoke about, or in your research, I should say, you speak about that you would like to see increased coordination between provinces and the federal government. What policies or best practices can we get from other federal states with respect to aligning education, immigration, and settlement? Do you want to briefly comment on that?
I think, for one, I'm not in favor of aligning education, immigration, and labor market. I don't think that's the direction we should head. There could be a linkage, but I don't think they should be linked as they are currently. We're going to run into these problems even more if we do that. So I want to clarify that. But there are other models we can look at in terms of how this is done. Again, the reason I keep going back to Germany is because of two reasons. One is because they're a highly decentralized federation like us. The states, their provinces, have a lot of autonomy just like ours. And so the partnerships that have been developed between the federal and the state governments is one worth looking at. Again, we've had good models. For example, the Nova Scotia Study Program is great. Yes.
It's been great testimony, and it's very hard for me to cut everybody off. But we do have to suspend briefly to set up our next panel, and I want to thank the witnesses for their time. And with that, colleagues, we'll have a brief suspension just to reset the panels. Thank you.